As parents, you already know you have at least a few dozen new photos each day, which easily adds up to thousands of photos each year. It easily can get out of hand when managing all the photos and videos of your family. If you're interested in finally managing your photos and videos to enjoy the best moments, check out Camera Roll Curator. This system is created by San Francisco based photographer and cinematographer JJ Juma Casas. He's outlined a great workflow that you can easily adopt, even if you're not a professional photographer. Take the first steps towards better organization and preservation of your family memories by taking the Camera Roll Curator course today. Use code BYTE, BYTE, to get 15% off enrollment. Welcome to Parenthood Bites, the podcast where we explore life as a parent in tech. I'm your host, Chow, and I have over 15 years of experience in tech, and I'm also currently working as a career coach. I'm the proud mother of 3 incredible boys. In each episode, we have an inspiring guest who will share their remarkable story. You'll find their wisdom and insights both relatable and enriching, because after all, we're all in this parenting journey together. So grab your favorite drink, get cozy, and let's dive into today's episode. Hi everyone, welcome to episode 24 of Parenthood Bites. We're here today with David Anderson, who's a filmmaker and UI developer currently living in the Bay Area. Hi David.
Hello, good apple. We'll have to explain that later, right?
Yeah, I was really excited to record this episode because I think when David and I used to work together, and I was thinking about that today, it was a really long time ago, right? It was before I had kids.
Yeah, yeah.
14 years ago. And we talked about having a
We did.
podcast, right? Like we talked about back then we were at IGN and IGN had its own podcast. So we were like, wouldn't it be great if we had a podcast? And we never actually kicked it off. And now at least we get to do a podcast together.
That's right. Here we are on podcasting, just like we dreamed of back in those glory days. So
yeah, we would see things in the news, right? And then we'd be like, oh man, we should really talk about that on our podcast.
That's exactly, and when I came to work each day and you and I sat next to each other, it was kind of like a podcast every day, It was just a private podcast, but it was a good one. So
yeah, I mean, I feel like it would have been entertaining for people. So
yeah, it entertained me at the time. So
people missed out. That's all I'm saying.
Well, they're not missing now. So here we are.
Hopefully they'll get a little of that right now.
Yep. We're going to do our best.
Yeah.
People.
So, I think people would want to know how many kids you have and what are their ages?
Okay, I have 3 kids. The oldest one is 32 years old now. Hard to believe, but it's true. And the middle one is 28, and the youngest one is 26. And they're all boys, and so they're all grown and all that kind of thing.
I was just thinking back yesterday. I remember when I was interviewing at IGN and you had just come from your youngest, his 6th grade graduation.
Yep.
And I was like, wow, he's in his late 20s now. Mid to late 20s.
Yeah, it's true. They're all grown up. It's funny. 2 of them still live with me, because Bay Area, right? And
I know.
And the middle one has moved to Los Angeles, and he's working in audio. Actually, not podcasting, but he works for a company that translates like Netflix films and stuff like that into different languages. And so
oh, that's neat.
Yeah, so he works a little bit in tech. He does a lot of. He's sort of like a trafficker of all the digital files and stuff like that. So it's kind of interesting.
Wow. So the oldest and youngest are still at home.
They're still here with me, and they have jobs here in town. And so I get to see them every day, which is great, And actually, the middle one came up last week, and that was good. We were all here together. It's awesome.
That's fun. Yeah, that's fun. Are any of them married?
No, they're all, available out there, ladies. So, so go for it,
If there's anyone in LA
right.
or in the Bay Area,
they're here. They are available. I raised them, pretty good. So, you'll have no trouble with them.
And I think like their age differences are pretty similar to my kids' age differences.
Yeah, very similar, very similar.
Yeah. So seeing you, I'm like, okay, that's my future with,
There you
maybe
go.
two kids staying at home, one
Yeah, well,
moving
it's
away.
great though. I love having them around. They're so interesting, because one thing I wanted for them while they were growing up was I wanted them to kind of experience, kind of what the city has to offer and all that kind of thing. So I wanted them to be involved in the arts and music and things like that. And two of them became really involved with music. The middle one, who has moved to Los Angeles, he went to the School of the Arts here in San Francisco, and as a musician. So he's a guitarist, and the oldest one's a guitarist, and the youngest one's a photographer. So I kind of set up my house, one room in the house. I just put a lot of musical instruments in it and everything, so that anybody could go in there anytime they wanted to and just pick up a musical instrument and start playing. We had guitars and like drum pads and maracas and tambourines and ukuleles and all kinds of instruments in there. And my goal was to have them, learn how to play music together. And ultimately they did. And they still do that when the middle one comes back, they'll go in that room and pick up instruments and start playing together. So kind of great.
Oh, that's so neat. Did they ever take lessons?
Yeah. Yeah. They took lessons.
And you let them pick? Did you let them pick what lessons they wanted?
Yeah, it was interesting. What happened was, I think I was at IGN and I looked on Craigslist and I saw some guy was selling a used electric guitar for $95. Some guy in Daly City. So I contacted him. He was selling it. I thought, like, well, this isn't a huge investment. If they don't like it, I can always sell it on Craigslist, right? So I went down there and I bought it and I brought it home and they took right to it. And I got really interested in it kind of too. So I was kind of learning along with them and I kind of improved the guitar. I bought new pickups and changed the tuners and put a new bridge and made it sound a lot better. And we bought a little amp at Guitar Center and they used to just play that thing all the time. And then later, I was still at IGN. I built two guitars. I didn't want to go out and spend like a lot of money, obviously, like I was saying. While I was working at IGN, I was buying these guitar parts off of eBay and kind of putting them together, in the evening. And I built two guitars for them. And these are the oldest two. The oldest one has one of them, and the middle one has the other one. They still play them all the time. So that was kind of nice.
That's so cool. Did you teach them how to play guitar at that time?
I I didn't really know much more than they did. I taught them like the chords, but I tell you what they learned from was the internet because there were so many guitar tabs and stuff on the internet, and also they could watch other people play. And it was great. They picked right up on, and they're kids, right? They're just like little information sponges, and they just picked it all up and were able to. I mean, they shot past me so fast. It was like, okay, well, I
Yeah.
give up. You guys are too good for me. I can't play with you anymore.
Plus, we have like adult responsibilities, right? Kids is just school, homework, and then they have time.
Yeah, and the middle one here in San Francisco, he went to James Lake Middle School. And at that time, I don't know if they still have this or not. They teamed up with the Blue Bear School of Music, which is over in the marina. And they had a teacher come in and it was kind of like that movie School of Rock. Did you ever see that? Yeah, it was like that.
Jack Black.
Yeah, it wasn't Jack Black, but it was a pretty good teacher. Would have been interesting if it had been Jack. Of course, he wasn't a real teacher in
Yeah.
the movie, but anyway. They taught all the kids. I mean, I kind of got my son going, but all the other kids were playing drums and bass, and some kids were singers, and they would perform, and it was great. He really got a good head start, and that's what helped him get into School of the Arts here in San Francisco for high school. So that was a really great resource too. Was the school had a really good music program. My oldest one, he just more or less taught himself. He's kind of like old school kind of guitar player, right? He just watched a lot of Jimi Hendrix videos and stuff like that.
That's so neat.
Yeah.
I mean, when kids are passionate about something, it's amazing how fast they learn.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. You try different things out. Like, I was saying, like the oldest one, we tried all kinds of stuff with him, like taekwondo and baseball. I remember when he was on the baseball team, he seemed like so lost out there. Like he totally had no interest at all in it. And you sort of have to just like accept that, like, okay, he doesn't want to play baseball. I'm okay with that, right? But when he picked up on a guitar for the first time, he just couldn't put it down. And it's still the case today, so that's still what he does a lot of.
That's awesome. And I chuckled when you said Taekwondo because that's what my kids are in.
Oh, really? How do they like it?
I think they like that they can spar with each other
Uh
without getting in trouble. So like they're in a more intermediate class now. So they have like the gear that they wear, the gloves and the helmet. And yesterday the teacher's like, okay, who wants to spar Darian, the oldest? And then the second one was like, me.
huh. Of course.
And we just see them going at it on the mat. And
It's like, I've been waiting for this all day.
yeah. And I think it's helping them like improve on their reflexes and stuff. So in school, if somebody gives them trouble or something, they at least know how to react. They're not just standing there like, oh no.
Yeah. That's great. I'm glad your kids are into it. My kids, I guess they just wanted to fight the old fashioned way. In the bedroom with the door
Yeah.
closed. Yeah.
You don't want to go in, right? When that happens, it's like, nope.
Yeah. No, that's up to you guys. I did try. I will say that, I had an older brother who was about 3.5 years older than me. And that's the same age difference between my oldest and my middle. And I had a lot of trouble with my older brother. He kind of gave me some problems growing up, It's the age difference, And I kind of vowed to myself, if I ever have kids, I'm not going to let those kind of shenanigans go on, And I think to the best of my ability, I did. But apparently they're telling me now that shenanigans went on. He said, Dad, you weren't around, but shenanigans happened.
I mean, that's always going to happen, right? But at least they
Yeah,
like
right.
being around each other. And like you said, they like
Oh, yeah, it's
jamming
great.
together and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's really awesome.
Yeah, they're still all really good friends. Yeah, it's so great. That was sort of my dream, so it all worked out. Sort of like this podcast. All my dreams are coming true, Chow. It's amazing.
I think you should just go buy a lottery ticket at this point. I mean,
Really? I'll do that today.
So, I like to ask what brought you to tech and how many years were you in tech before you became a parent?
Yeah, so this is kind of funny because I never really intended to be in tech, honestly. What happened was after I got out of college, I kind of didn't know what I wanted to do. And I had a friend who lived in New York City, and he said his sister worked in film production and she was moving to LA and he needed somebody to share the apartment with him, split the rent or whatever. And so I said, sure, so I jumped on a plane, went up to New York. And so I didn't really know what I was going to do up there. I had a degree in journalism. And so I thought, like, well, I'll be a writer, I'll go up there and be a writer. So I looked, it's kind of hard to find a job doing that, if you don't have any kind of, references or anything, or anything you've even written, But the one thing I did have, I had a Macintosh, and at that time, they were actually really looking for people who knew how to use Macintoshes and were kind of good with them, So that was my first job was, using a Macintosh at this publishing company. And it was actually kind of interesting, full circle. It was a music publishing company. They were writing music textbooks. It was for HarperCollins. And it was one of the first textbooks being totally laid out on a computer. So that tells you how old this was. But anyway, but it was great, and that kind of got me into it. And I kind of, and at that time there was a really small community of Macintosh users in New York City. And I met everybody who was into Macintosh at that time. And so that gave me all kinds of great connections. And I started doing a lot of, Macintosh work around town, and people would recommend me, and I worked at all kinds of places. In my entire life, I've wanted to make films. And so it wasn't possible at that time to make films on computers, but you could do animations. And so I started doing animations, and that kind of got me into, at the time, there was a program called Macromedia Director, and, Macromedia ultimately got bought by Adobe, but it was a multimedia software that would combine animations and sound and music and everything. And so I met a lot of people who were also kind of creative, artists and things who wanted to make kind of creative multimedia. And I got kind of intrigued by the programming aspect of it, because you could program it to, do animations when you clicked on them and things like that, And so that's how I sort of got into programming. I kind of learned that way. And then not too long after that, I got married. We had a baby. And we had a little tiny apartment in New York, and we tried to make it work for a while. But, we just needed more room. And so we ended up moving to San Francisco, and where we got a lot more room for about the same amount of money, which was great. I don't think that's true anymore, but at the time you could do it, And then when I got here, I kept kind of doing the same kind of work. And ultimately, I guess in 1996, Gosh, this sounds so like such a long time ago. I started, the internet was like the new thing and everybody's learning HTML and CSS and JavaScript. And I was like, okay, well, I guess this is the next thing, because, I got to support the fam and stuff. So I learned HTML and CSS and JavaScript. And I worked at a startup called Zaplet, which is very interesting experience. I'd never been to one. It worked at a startup before and full Silicon Valley. This is like one of those Kleiner Perkins, heavily funded kind of things. And I started working there, and it was kind of my introduction to the whole, world of tech startups. Back then it was sort of set the template for the way they are now. With the food and the craziness and the working all the time and stuff like that. And they do all that so you'll stay there and work. And it works. So anyway, so that was a good experience, and I got into user experience design and stuff too there. And then had the big dot bomb period of time, around 2001, and everybody in the world got laid off. And they closed all the .com companies and everything. And so then I went to work at a company down in Santa Clara. They were making interfaces for cable television, and so I was designing interfaces for cable TV. And that was kind of interesting because they were doing it all with web technologies, which is sort of a new thing at the time to do that instead of like having custom applications for writing interfaces. That was sort of hard because by then I was like a single parent. And so I had to go down there and then get back up here every day. They were an after school program. There was a really great program out where they went to Argonne over here in the Sunset area of San Francisco. And it's a really great school. And they had a great after school program called RASDAC. It was like Richmond District after school program, something like that. They called it RASDAC. Anyway, it was a great program, but I had to leave there by 4:45 every day, really rush to get up here and pick them up by 6 o'clock because the school people really hated it if you showed up late because they want to go home. I don't blame them. So I really, had to like haul up here and pick up the kids. So that was quite a thing every day. It was quite a commute. Yeah. So I started looking for something a little closer to make it easier on myself. And that's when I ended up going to IGN. That certainly was a lot easier. Where were we then? We were like
Brisbane.
Brisbane. We were in Brisbane. Yeah. And that was a lot easier to get over to, that side of town from Brisbane.
So it's a lot better.
Yeah. So anyway, that's how I kind of ended up in tech. It was sort of like I was interested in it. I didn't really have a background in it, but I was interested enough to, do some self teaching and took some online lessons. I'm always learning. So I'm always trying to learn. And I actually really did enjoy programming in the beginning before it became like, everybody got really good at it. And then all of a sudden it's like, hey, what's wrong with you? So I don't know. I still do some. These days I'm using a program called DaVinci Resolve, which is it's kind of like Premiere, but much better because it kind of incorporates everything and it's become very popular. But they have a sort of an open programming language and it allows you to write your own plugins in a very easy to use language. So I am still programming those kind of things. And I still have some clients that I do WordPress work for. So I'm still doing PHP and JavaScript and CSS and things like that occasionally. Not as much anymore, kind of focusing more on the filmmaking stuff, but I still do some. So
it's more fun when you're doing it on your own.
Yeah, when there's nobody, you set your own deadlines.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't have to code reviews except for yourself.
Like I was telling you that I was redoing my website, right? Because as you mentioned, it is pretty bland, kind of black and white, but it's more fun when I'm trying to figure it out and just I see something cool and I'm like, oh, let me figure out how to code it. And no one's judging how I'm writing it.
Yeah.
And,
Right. Or when you check it in.
Now when it's on my own, I can do whatever I want.
Yeah, there you go. It's perfect. And I do still use Git all the time because it's just really a great way of keeping track of that stuff, right? Even for all the stuff I do on my own. For one thing, I know it's always there. I can go anywhere in the world and get to it. And I don't have to worry about it, and it's versioned. So if I need to go back to something I did earlier that I liked, I can just go back to that version. So it's, I actually use Bitbucket because at the time that I got it, it was, I guess it's still free if you don't have too many people. So, and I do have a GitHub account too. So I do both, but most of my stuff's on Bitbucket because I like the interface since I kind of come from an interface background, you know. So,
I've been checking my stuff in too, but my comments are just for me. And so,
and that's always fun too, right? Read your own comments like, oh,
yeah,
wow, what was I thinking?
I wish I had written more about what I was doing there.
Yeah. Now I don't remember. Why
Yeah,
didn't I comment it? Those people at work were right. I should comment more.
but it's okay because it's just you.
Yeah, it's all good. It's just me. That's all good.
You mentioned like your first kid, and then you jumped to having more kids and stuff. So, what was that like when they were little and you were taking care of all three?
Well, it was kind of tough. Fortunately, and I think I heard you say this on one of your other podcasts. I remember when my third one was born, I saw he was a boy. I went, all right. It's like, I can do boys. You know, I'm ramped up for production, right? So I know I got all the necessary gear for doing boys, you know. Plus, I can stick them all in one room. You know, nothing wrong with having girls. I mean, that would have been great too. But I thought this is great because it's very cost effective, especially if you have three kids, which, I mean, how many people have three kids anymore, right? So you and me.
Yeah, you don't have to buy a whole new wardrobe and
It's true.
all the toys, everything you can just reuse.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so that was all great. But anyway, so that helped a lot. And I'm a boy and they're boys. So that helped a lot too, right? So there was just the four of us and we just persevered. Like I said, it was kind of hard, you know, doing the pickups and drop-offs and stuff like that. And occasionally their mom would help, and so that was helpful too. But it was just the four of us here, and so I did end up doing a whole lot of like both parenting type stuffs because, you know, I was the only parent here. It was challenging, but like I said, they made it easy because they were good kids too, you know. So I mean, they're kids, so they always had their moments. I mean, but in general, they were just really great kids to have, and so it wasn't really much of a problem from that side of things. And it was just more the logistic type stuff. Yeah, it was like more like, you know, drop offs and pickups and getting them to the guitar class or whatever they were going to, making sure that, and, you know, making sure all the teachers get paid and, you know, all that stuff happens. And I also tried to go on field trips with them as much as I could too. I always liked doing that, you know, helping out at the school. I really liked the teachers. You know, they were great, and I really liked going over and helping out with the teachers, and, you know, it kind of stretched me out. There were probably some times
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a lot
yeah,
with three kids, activities, and helping out in class. That's
yeah,
quite a bit of stuff.
yeah. You know, one nice thing about the San Francisco school district, I guess, is, you know, it's kind of weird getting in the school you want to get in. You know, that's kind of hard at first. So with the first kid, you know, there was a school we wanted to get him into, and they called us up like 2 weeks before school was to start, and they said, "Look, looks like you're not going to get in there because there's like 18 other parents ahead of you." But we have one spot open at this other school, which was, like I said, Argonne. And so, you know, we did the research and said, okay, that seems like a good school. So we took that one spot that they had available. And one of the nice things about the San Francisco Unified School District is that if you have one kid in that school, your other kids can automatically go to that school. So they don't want you running all over town picking kids up. And so that was great. So that actually helped me out a lot because I could just go to that one school. When the oldest one got to middle school, we have one in the neighborhood, James Lick. And so he went there with a lot of the neighborhood kids. That was kind of good because he not too far to go to that one either, and I could
Mhm.
still go get the other two at the other school. Going and picking them up were some of my best memories of that time because we would listen to music on the way back. My youngest one really liked Alanis Morissette, and we used to listen to that "You Ought to Know" song every day coming out, which is probably a little advanced for him, but he liked it anyway. So those are really fun. We would like sing in the car and things like that, you know, coming back from pickups.
Yeah, it's like really busy, but also some of the best times.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's what you got to do. You got to make the most of those because those days go fast. You probably notice that now. It's like, wow, they're like really shooting up. And you got to get all that in before they become teenagers because after that, it's like really difficult after they turn 13. It's like they only want their friends, and so they're
Yeah.
done with mom and dad.
And then they don't have field trips
No, they
either.
don't have field trips either. Well, I don't, you know, I can't remember. No, they didn't go on any field trips. So,
Yeah. I mean, I used to try to go on all their field trips, and then I realized, okay, oldest went to middle school. They had one field trip and it was canceled. And then The second one, no field trips. And now it's just my third one.
Is he doing field trips?
Yeah, he's still in second grade,
Oh,
so
great,
he
great,
has
great,
field
great.
trips. So I'm like, okay, let me go to
Yeah,
all of
yeah.
those field trips, and go to his school, go help out because the older ones, they don't have that anymore.
Oh, yeah, right.
Except you can help out at their socials, which are like dances. They have, but my kids are like, we're not going to any of those. They don't want to go. So I'm not going to go
I,
help out if my kids don't go.
I'm with him on that one. I didn't like dances either.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not going to force them. Like it's okay. And they have this weird thing at their school now where it's like by lottery. So even if you want to go to the dance or social, you might not be able to.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so if you get chosen and your friends don't get chosen, then why would you
Oh,
even go,
wow.
right?
Yeah.
So I'm pretty glad they don't want to go.
That's pretty
But it's not
crazy.
very inclusive, is it? Yeah.
Wow. Huh. Wonder why it's like that. Well, I'm sure there's some reason. I'm sure they have very good reasons for that, but
Too many kids, maybe. I don't know.
probably, yeah, it's like they can only handle so many at a time. I understand that.
So, how did your work life change when you became a parent?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like when I first became a parent, I was living in New York, like I said. I was super excited to become a parent. That was just the best thing to me. I was working at the New York Times at the time. I was working in the photo department, which is sort of always like sort of a little bit of a dream. Once again, my dream came true.
Look at you. Your whole life, your dreams just keep
I
coming
know it's
true. You got to have more dreams.
I should dream bigger,
Yeah.
right? But that one did kind of come true. So it was great. I was working in the New York Times, like, wow, this is great, And then I had a baby, and that was great. That was so awesome. And what happened was, my wife at the time was working at the Associated Press, and I was working at the New York Times, and they're both sort of in the same area, town Manhattan. So she would work from like 8 till 4. And I would work from like 4:30 till 12:30. So we were on two different shifts. And so I would take care of my son all day when he was a baby. And she would come home and, we'd tag team it. And then I would go off and work until the middle of the night and then come home. And she was happy to see me when I got there. So like, you get him, like, all right, because when they wake up in the middle of the night and all that kind of thing. I remember that very distinctly. But so that's how we handled that at the time. And ultimately though, and then we did look for like some place to keep him during the day. Now we looked at some places and I just couldn't do it. I was just like, I can't turn him over to somebody all day. So we didn't do that. So what happened was we decided to move to San Francisco, and she looked after him full time while I worked. That was actually kind of tough too, because right before we left New York, she contracted a form of cancer. It's called a molar pregnancy. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
Yeah, it's when the fertilized egg doesn't, it implants itself in the uterus, but it doesn't start forming like a child. It becomes like a cancer. And so she had that. And so she had to go through several procedures. We thought that it was gone. Then we moved out to San Francisco, and it turns out she still had it, and she had to have, radiation and chemo. So that first year we lived here, it was pretty tough because she was kind of bedridden, the whole time. And so I was working. I was just finding work here in town and doing a lot of multimedia. I was probably one of the first, remote workers, because I was still doing a lot of work for people in New York at the time. And I was just putting it onto discs and sending it to them because, that was how it was done. Until I eventually I got a job as a game producer here in town. And then she got better. And that's one reason we have 3.5 years between the first child and the second child, is because they said we had to wait make sure she was 100% ready to go again. And so that's what happened. So that's what I was doing. I was working. She was staying at home at that point. First we were tag teaming, then she was staying here. And then it was me all the time when you knew me at IGN.
Yeah. So you took on a lot of the childcare work.
Yeah, I didn't mind though. I just liked being around them. I was going to tell you, when I was working in New York, I just didn't like to go to work. Because I had to leave my son, So I think people today should be really grateful that they can work from home and be around their kids. I think that's just awesome. I would have loved to have that. What a blessing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when my kids were younger, I had to,
I
go
remember
to San
that.
Francisco
I
and
remember
stuff and
that.
just gone all day. Yeah, and I just missed so much of them when they were hitting their milestones.
You used to send me all those great texts from the train. That's like,
Yeah, we're stuck here again.
You loved riding that train, right?
Stuck in the tunnel again.
Much better to work from home. So I'm glad that people can do that these days. It's wonderful.
Yeah, yeah, being able to see all their kids' early
Yeah,
milestones.
yeah. It's like I said, it's a short period of time, so make the most of it. That's what I say. So
Absolutely. Did you have parental leave at New York Times?
when the baby was born,
Yeah.
yeah, I had that. That was no problem. And then also I had my other jobs too. Yeah, so that all worked out fine. So I mean, I didn't take a lot of time because I didn't really need it. But what was worse was my oldest one was born in Mount Sinai Hospital, like right across the street from Central Park, which was kind of cool. I thought, like, oh, this is awesome, like look out the window and see Central Park. But they have like I forgot how many babies. It's something like 200 babies a day born there.
Wow.
I know. So they want to get you in and out as fast as possible. So that was interesting. So she had to leave the next day. She didn't really, we had to get her home. So that was rough. But then we moved out here, and the other two were born at Kaiser. They had such nice rooms.
Right.
It was so wow. This is like a luxury, resort or something, And they I think she stayed there 3 days or something like that, and that was great. But as far as work, I had no trouble getting parental leave.
That's good. Yeah, all three of mine are born at Kaiser. And it was like, wow, you get your own room, you have a little couch. And we had like a leather couch with the third kid because it was a new hospital in San
Oh
Leandro.
yeah,
Yeah.
nice.
And we were like, wow, you get a nice view of the freeway.
The freeway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, it's super nice. So that was quite a change from Mount Sinai. Which was quite an experience, but it was good. It's always good to be able to, like, my oldest one can always say that I'm like a native New Yorker. He only lived there 18 months, but whatever.
Has he gone back?
No, he hasn't actually. So
But still a native New Yorker.
he's still a native New Yorker. Yeah, he may change his mind if he goes about saying that, but it was a good thing. I love New York. Actually, I would have stayed there. The Bay Area was just easier with kids. Honestly, if it weren't for working in tech, my life would have been so much tougher. Because they were so understanding about my situation, with kids and all that kind of stuff. And then at IGN, it was so great. Remember when I used to bring them in there, and they would get to play the video games before anybody else got to play them,
Yeah.
and that was so much fun for them. They love the fact that I worked at IGN. They would brag to their friends about it if they only knew. That was great. So working in tech and having kids, I think they go together pretty well.
You talked about a lot of the positives of it. What has been your biggest challenge or struggle being a parent in tech?
Takes a lot of time. They expect a lot out of you. And, sometimes when there's a release coming up and you have to be there late, you got to be there late. What are you going to do? I would say that's more of a challenge than a problem because, I mean, it just goes with the territory, I mean, you got to do what you got to do. But they make it worthwhile, right? There's so many great perks to working in tech. And they made it very easy for me to be a single parent and to gave me time when I needed to go do stuff with my kids.
Mm-hmm.
Every company I worked at pretty much has been great about all that stuff. So, and I worked with a kind of variety of companies. I worked at IGN. I worked at a healthcare company, one of my most recent jobs, and that was a great company to work at. They really took care of everybody there. Several of my friends were at the age where they were having their first child, and they were so accommodating to everybody. So that was great. If you're going to be a parent, it's a great industry to be in. The downside is kind of what's happening now is all the layoffs and stuff, and that just happens. I mean, that's the other side of the coin is you got to be ready for that. I mean, that happened to me at IGN, and it also happened to me at the healthcare company. They just staff up too much, and then they realize, like, hey, we could save a lot of money if we just fired half the company. So, or laid off. People aren't actually getting fired, but that's tough. But you have to, I would say, if people are out there listening and they're working at a tech company and they are a parent, you have to be prepared for that eventuality. So always have a 6-month plan in place, because it'll take you time to find another one. You got to still take care of the kiddos, right? So you just have to be ready for that. And if you are ready, it's not a big problem. You just have to realize that it happens. And having been through it like 3 times already, I feel like I'm qualified to speak to that issue.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. And
So,
I will say that also when you do get laid off and stay home, the kids actually like having you at home, right?
oh
Like
yeah.
when I left Twitter and I was at home all the time with I mean, I was home already working from home, but like, I wasn't in the room working. The kids were really happy. They were like, can you just not find another job? Just stay home with us, hang out with us. You're happier. We're happier.
As if you needed motivation.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Of course, they love having their mom there. That's great, you know. I mean, and it's so great that so many people get to. I know it can be challenging because I went through that too. Like I was saying, when I first moved here, I was still basically remote working from New York. I remember once this is back when they had the external drives and stuff like that with removable media. And I remember once my son came and fed his oatmeal to my removable
Oh my
drive.
God.
He said, "Oh, he looks hungry," and he's like putting oatmeal in it. I was just like, "Okay." So I guess I need to put that on a shelf next time when I buy the new one.
Because you're definitely going to have to buy a new one.
I definitely bought a new one. I just thought it was kind of cute too. He was feeding oatmeal to the removable drive.
It's like you want to get mad, but also, oh, it's cute.
Aw, it is kind of cute. But yeah, I mean, how can you get mad? I mean, he didn't know what he was doing. So, but those are the kinds of things you have to deal with. You have to kind of keep your equipment away from them, and they do kind of tend to wander in when you're having meetings and stuff like that. So got to kind of deal with that side of it as well. Especially when they're preschool and they want you. When they want you, they want you. It's kind of like I don't care about your meeting.
Nope.
Right. So
Yeah. And if I want to come in and draw, I'm going to draw. I'm going to do
yeah,
what I want.
and you're gonna love it
Yeah.
because it's gonna be awesome.
Yeah.
And usually it is awesome. I still have some of the stuff my kids drew when they were that age. It's kind of funny. You look at it, it's like, wow, kids really aren't good at drawing. But then you go, oh, it's kind of cute though.
Yeah.
He tried to write my name.
My favorite is when they have make the little gifts at school. It's like,
Oh
oh,
yeah.
Valentine's Day, they make you a little picture frame with their face in it, or like Mother's Day, they make me
Yeah.
some drawing of something. And
Yeah.
you don't know what it is, but you love it.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually still have some of those hanging around here. I have like the ones they take, what is it, like not spaghetti but the rigatoni or whatever, and they paste it onto like a picture frame and they spray it gold or something. I still have some of those around, so
Those are the best
those are the best.
because they don't make that when they grow up.
Nah, no, they make other things for you. Crazy. It's a good time. I feel really, really lucky to have had the kids I had, and I know you feel the same way because your kids are wonderful too. And we're just all really lucky. Us people who have kids, I kind of feel sorry for the people who don't have kids, getting to do what they want all the time and everything. It must be awful.
Having all that
All that
money
money.
to
It's heartbreaking, really.
get whatever they want.
Oh yeah, no messes to clean up except their own.
I remember one time you walked into work and you were like, my kids just decided to pour a cup of milk onto the carpet,
Yeah.
and I was spending all night cleaning that up.
Yeah. Well, our carpet took a beating here. I will say that. carpet had it worse than anybody around here. Because they love to like take their food and watch Rugrats or whatever was on at the time. And or Rocco's Modern Life. I used to know all those Nickelodeon shows, and I know them as well as the kids do because I loved them. I thought they were great. I didn't really like Doug. Doug was kind of weird, but but
Rugrats was
I
pretty
loved
fun.
Rugrats. Rugrats was right on the money. They knew what they were talking about, right? You know, I loved how they always mangled the words, like the little one with red hair called Angelica. Angelica. They always like figure out some way to figure out something sweet to put in it, like Angelica and things like that. So that show knew what they were talking about.
Yeah, I wish my kids would watch some of those shows now, but they like to watch YouTube,
Yeah,
just whatever's on YouTube.
so do mine. And so do I.
They're like watching Mr. Beast,
Oh
and
yeah.
it's like, then we'll go to the store and they'll see like a Mr. Beast chocolate bar, and it's like, of course, really expensive, and they're
Yeah.
like, "Can we
Well,
buy
of course.
that?"
Of
No,
course you can,
no.
darling. Anything for my precious. Nah, it's not like that.
So, what are some things you struggle with their current ages of 32, 28, and 26?
I don't know. It's actually great. It's actually, like I said, they're still around, and they're sort of like, whether you like it or not, they're a little bit of a reflection of yourself, because you, so it's kind of
Yeah.
like seeing yourself, it's like, oh, gee, I kind of like these people I'm around,
I'm
I am
delightful.
so delightful, and so are they. I mean, there's a little nugget of truth in there, but I do like being around them. They're really fun. And, the only issues we have are the same ones, like, hey, somebody left dirty dishes in the sink, right? And things like that. That has never changed.
At this point, is it like having two roommates instead of two kids?
It's a lot like having two roommates, and it's great, because the same kind of thing I used to do with roommates, I do with them now. We watch movies or play video games or talk about current events, which is something I didn't do that when they were young, but we do it now. It's interesting to see how their minds grow over time, especially when, once they hit their teen years and then they go through college and then they become young adults, seeing how their minds develop and how their opinions form and the things that they're interested in. And you see some commonalities from my own life to their life, but there's all new things, right? Things I didn't experience because I'm not that generation.
Yeah.
And so, and I would say the best part of all of that, of having older kids, is they keep me informed about what's going on. My son will always show me something that's either funny or interesting on YouTube or whatever, because he seeks them out, right? Like we all do, but he knows more, and all three of them know more about kind of what's current and what's going on in the world than I do, which really helps me out because I don't have to go try to muddle through and figure that stuff out on my own. Like I said, I've been taking classes at City College, and most of the people there are college students. They're like 18 to 25 years old, so I'm around a lot of younger people a lot anyway, and it definitely helps me relate to those classmates better than I would ordinarily. I'm not like somebody coming in there totally clueless about what popular culture is.
Yeah, yeah. Instead of you being the one to inform the kids, now they're helping you out as well, right?
They're keeping me current. Yeah. So that's great. I mean, that is invaluable to me, because I want to know what's going on. I don't want to be like stuck in the past.
Yeah. So, what would you say were the hardest ages? Just so I know, because
Oh, well, there's the early, obviously when they're babies, there's just a whole lot to do, right? That everybody's had a baby knows that. But after that, the hardest was, honestly, they become teenagers. And like I was saying, they go through a period after they turn 13, they get up to be 14, 15 years old, probably between the ages of 13 and 18.
oh
I mean, it
gosh.
doesn't have to be hard. Yeah, I know you're going right into the
Yeah.
heart of it here. Uh, but honestly, I mean, it's not terrible, but they're not reliant on you anymore. And also they want you to keep your nose out of their business, kind of.
They're not as pleasant,
They're not as
right?
pleasant. They also pick up bad habits from their friends a lot. So if they have a friend who kind of like, doesn't have a good relationship with their parents, they kind of pick up some of the bad habits from that person and bring them home. And you're like, sorry, that's not going to fly here, right?
Nope.
So that's kind of hard because you have to like set them straight, and it's not fun setting them straight. A lot of times, when they're young and you're setting them straight, it's not so hard because it's like a safety issue a lot of times, right? Like, don't run out in traffic and things like that. Yeah. But when they're older, it's more like, how to be a nice person, and how to get along with people and how to develop as a human being. They don't want to hear it a lot. They'd rather get their social cues from, pop culture or something,
Because they think they know better, right? At that age.
Well, and sometimes they do. I mean, I always knew better than my parents. I don't know about you, but I always had to set my parents straight, It's like,
And then they set you straight after
yeah,
that.
there was a lot of straight setting going on back in those days. But yeah, I would say like, but once again, once you have the oldest one and you kind of see what's going on, the ones that follow, if you have ones that follow, you know what to do. They're all unique, and they all have unique issues of their own that you deal with, but they have a lot of common, it's just because of the age and stuff. I don't know. I don't think there was any time that was too hard. I mean, there's always hard. I mean, there was a few times when they did things like lock themselves in their room that kind of drove me crazy. It's like, okay, we all got to take the locks off the door, obviously, But I really hated when they did that, when they would lock themselves in the room. It's like, you can't do that. I didn't actually take the locks off the door. We just sat down and talked about it. So
Yeah, I had to have that talk where I was like, you can't lock your doors. I
yeah,
know there's locks on there,
yeah.
but we don't use them.
Yeah,
So
yeah, exactly. I mean, you have to tell them because they will do that, because like, keep those awful parents out of here.
they'll just be in there with their phone, right? And just,
Yep. Whatever they're doing, they just don't want you in there. It's like, okay, but that you can't do that, so that, when I think back, that was probably the time that I probably got most upset, as a parent, was when they did that. Because, I think it's a psychological thing. They're locking me out of their lives, so I'm not too keen on
it's
that.
like we don't need to be in there all the time. In fact, I don't want to be in their room, but don't lock
No.
your door.
Yeah, right. But when I need to get in there, I need to get in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a control issue too, right? They want to have control, so you just learn to deal with it, and they learn to deal with it. And it's just having the talk, and like you said, so.
I think sometimes, like with my kids, when they have like that attitude,
Mhm.
just looking at me like they don't want me around, I'm like, no, 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 we're not having that. I got to nip it in the bud early.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that's the way to deal with it, right? They have to learn. They're depending on you to teach them all these things, and so if you do it right, then you don't have any problems. Now, well, I won't say you won't have any problems, but the problems you have are not as bad, and you won't have as many of them. I will say that. So, it's an ongoing process because we're all human beings, and we never stop learning. I never stop learning. There's a sort of a feedback loop going on. They were teaching me how to be a good parent, and I was teaching them how to be good kids
Good people.
and good people, right? Because I'd like to think, if you're going to put all this time and energy and resources into raising, people, you want them to be good people, right? And so, it was important to me.
Yeah, you want them to be fun to be around.
Yeah, yeah, hopefully, right? And I think they are.
Yeah, I'm like, if I don't want to hang out with you, geez.
We got to work on
Yeah.
that. It's a great experience, and once they get out of those teen years and get into college and kind of become more independent and things like that, that's kind of fun to watch too. Actually to see them actually take the things you've taught them and put them into practice, and plus their own learnings, of course, and everybody else who's had an influence in their life. So it's kind of great to see them actually become the person you hope they would be.
See them blossom.
Blossom into beautiful flowers that make the world a better place.
So, what's something that you would tell someone who's planning to have kids, or something you knew before you became a parent?
Okay, well, I would say this. Be sure that's what you want, because if it's not what you want, you're going to have a hard time. Because I've met people like that, who kind of change their mind, halfway through the process. And that's not good for anybody. And the other thing I would say is, like, just be prepared. It's a lot of work. And if you're not ready for work of that sort, then you shouldn't do it. And I do have friends, a lot of friends actually, who never had kids. And they made that choice consciously, and they were right. They didn't want them. They didn't want that in their life. And that was the right choice, And I say, like, if you really don't want them, don't have them, because it's a huge responsibility. And also, it wouldn't be fair to the kids. I mean, how would you feel not being wanted?
Yeah.
So, and there are a lot of people like that, unfortunately, who had parents that didn't want them, and I think that's terrible. And doesn't mean life is over for them because their parents didn't want them, but just be really sure what you want in life. Think about it. Imagine yourself, 10, 20, 30 years from now, and what you want your life to be like. And, make plans. The best thing to do is envision your life, do a little research, see if it's something you really want to do. Don't do it for the wrong reasons. Don't do it because you're lonely.
Then get a dog.
You get a dog, right?
Yeah.
And, I mean, if you do want to do it, it's the best thing in the world. If you don't want to do it, great.
Yeah.
Good on you. That's what I would say.
Go spend that money on things you want instead of on kids.
or whatever. Or, enjoy your nieces and nephews. I know a lot of people who do that. It's like they have a lot of the joy of having kids without all the overhead, or less of the overhead. I mean, when you're taking care of your nieces and nephews, it can be just as responsibility heavy as having your own kids, but it's not the same. It can be a very joyful thing to have nieces and nephews. I mean, that's why I was before I had kids of my own. I loved my nieces, and they were great. And I actually heard from my niece just this week. She texted me out of the blue and sent me a bunch of hearts and stuff, so. Which is so nice,
Yeah.
because, she has kids of her own now. So that would be my advice. My nieces will send me hearts. So, because that was back when I was carefree and I seemed like a lot of fun. I never scolded them or anything, It's like, yeah, they used to steal from me all the time. Little rats. They would get in my car and take all the loose change out of my car. And I knew they were doing it too. And I was just like, next time I go through a toll booth, I'm going to be so angry. Ambivalent about having kids, or you're not really sure, and you have nieces and nephews. That's awesome too.
Yeah.
Help your brother or sister out. Take your kids somewhere fun. Give your brother or sister a break.
And then you can give them back when they're tired.
And then you give them back. Exactly.
It's a win-win.
And and they'll love you for it.
That's really good advice. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for sharing all your experiences.
Yeah, sure. Well, we didn't really get too much into our fun IGN experiences, but maybe that's for our own podcast. Huh?
Yeah, for another podcast, another time.
Another podcast, another day.
We'll have to talk about that more offline and explore that
We will. This has been so super fun, Chow. I'm so glad you invited me to do this.
Yeah, it was so much fun.
I just love your podcast. It's great.
Thank you. Like
I said, I've been listening to it. Thank goodness for earbuds. I just put them in and I can walk around. Nobody knows I'm listening to Chow's podcast. Not that there's anything wrong with it.
Except for the people that you shared it with.
Yeah, I did. I did that yesterday. I said, you got to listen to this podcast. Because I'm on it.
Yeah, be sure to share this episode when it comes out on April Fool's.
April Fool's Day, yeah. And so basically, everything I just told you is not true. This has been a big April Fool's gag.
April Fool's.
Sorry, folks. I don't even have kids. What do you think about that? Anyway, so this is great. I enjoyed this so much.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much for sharing everything.
Yeah. Happy to be here. Happy to share. And I, hope somebody listening, if there's one little nugget that helps you out, I hope it's,
Yeah, someone that's busy changing diapers right now, they're like, oh, it is going to get better. It's going to be so much fun when they grow up.
I can't wait till 25 years from now.
Yeah.
Life's going to be wonderful.
Yeah.
When I don't have stinky diapers under my nose.
Just got 20 more years to go.
Yeah, no problem. Well, fortunately, diapers are kind of short-lived. So.
Yeah.
If you can get through that, you can get through anything.
Yeah. And save so much money when they're potty trained.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'll tell one story. When one of my kids was getting potty trained, he used to sit on the potty. And when he was done, he'd go, Dad, I need a wipe. And I was like, oh, there's my favorite job. Yeah. So anyway, I'll leave you with that one.
Our kid would be like, who wants to wipe my butt now? And then we do rock, paper, scissors.
Oh, yeah. That's the true joy of parenthood right there. You've arrived. Yeah. So anyway.
Well, thank you so much. And I hope you have a great rest of your week.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you. Take care. Thank you so much for joining us today on Parenthood Bites. We hope you found our episode informative and entertaining. If you're a parent in the tech world or know someone who is, we'd love to hear from you. Please reach out to us at chow@parenthoodbites.co, and we'll be thrilled to add your experiences to our interviews. That's chow, CHIAO, @parenthoodbites.co. And to our potential sponsors out there, if you're a business or know of one that would like to support and partner with our podcast, please don't hesitate to get in touch. You can also reach us at chow@parenthoodbites.co. Thank you once again for tuning in, and we wish you a fantastic rest of your week. Until next time, take care and stay curious.